So hello everyone and welcome to episode 31 of the Deercast. I should start with an apology because it's just myself and our very esteemed guest on today's episode. Harry rang me this afternoon feeling very sorry for himself. He's contracted COVID or man flu or something much worse and has had to cry off and go back to bed. But nevertheless, we have forged on and recorded a great episode for you with our guest. Our guest today is Tom Rice, who is a PRS shooter, deer stalker, Zeiss pro shooter, and many other things that I'm sure we'll cover in today's episode. I've been out stalking with Tom once before, but we were lucky enough to bump into Tom at a Bagara press event back in the summer. And Harry and I, as sort of fairly basic deer stalkers, if I can describe us like that, we're sort of using some of the really fancy Bagara rifles, trying to hit targets at what was it, 600 meters or something, Tom. And Tom was giving us some hints and tips, which clearly have come from his background as a target shooter, PRS shooter, and it just made us think. Actually, there's probably a lot that us as deer stalkers could probably learn from you within the PRS world. So, without further ado. Welcome to the podcast, Tom.
Well, thanks for having me, Tom. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's great to meet you at the Bagara event there. You got to shoot some nice rifles. So, yeah.
We did indeed. So do you want to just quickly sort of let the listeners that don't know who you are, sort of who you are, what your background is, what you do, how you got into deer stalking, sort of that type of thing?
Yeah, so my current role at the moment is a mechanical technician at a place called Diamond Light Source. It's a scientific research complex up in the Chilterns in Oxfordshire. Yeah, that's not really related to shooting in any way. So the shooting started about 26 years ago, something like that. I was just helping out on a pheasant shoot. My godfather was taking it; he was gamekeeper on the shoot. So I just got involved going up there, feeding the birds and all that. And we was running Larson's traps at the time, and he'd let me go off with a rimfire and try and get a rabbit for the traps and things. So
yeah,
it was great sort of growing up doing that. Then it's probably about 2015. I thought I fancy a go at deer stalking. So we started looking into that a bit more. I didn't have an FAT at the time, and Thames Valley Police sort of stipulated that they wanted me to do the DSC1 and have a mentor before they'd let me have a rifle, basically. That all went okay. I picked up a 2.2 LR and a 2.43, 2.43 for the deer, obviously. And just got into stalking. Locally, we've got roe, muntjac, fallow. I've got stalking in Scotland. I've been over to Ireland quite a few times. So we've done most things like that. But during lockdown, I think 2020 it was, I just on YouTube one day and come across a video of one of these PRS competitions.
Yeah,
I thought that looks great fun. I had joined a club which shot at Bisley, just laying on your belly shooting at targets at Bisley. So I'd got myself a 6.5 Creedmoor for that. So I thought, right, let's go along to the first competition sort of at the end of lockdown as such. It was held at Orion in Wales. Turned up with my Tikka stalking rifle and managed to win the day.
Bloody hell.
So I thought this is a bit of me. Quite enjoy that.
But for the listeners that don't know what PRS is, what is PRS?
So PRS is you're shooting steel plates. You have a time limit. So a stage will be sort of 90 seconds, 2 minutes maybe. You'll have to shoot multiple targets in that time from many different positions, shooting off of barricades. Some of them are prone. You might just shoot prone and shoot a line of targets going out. But yeah, there's a lot of moving around, jumping around on a time limit.
And what sort of distance are the targets, or does it vary? Is that the kind of joy of it?
Yeah, the targets are the different distances all the time. Generally, you might go out to 1,000 meters with the centre fire. With the
Hell.
2-2 side of things, we tend not to go much past 250 meters. So yeah,
And
it could be anything in between those two.
and you get told, so if you turn up at the stage at the barricade or whatever, do you get told, well, that target's 250 meters, or do you have to guess? Is that kind of part of the skill in terms of you've got to kind of try and figure out what distance you think it is and dial it
So
appropriately?
at the start of the day, you're given the course of fire. It's a matchbook which has every stage in there. So it'll explain the sequence you've got to shoot, which targets you've got to shoot, and generally it will have distances in there. It's always good practice to check them distances out because they're not
Yeah.
always correct. And when you're
Okay.
shooting little tiny plates, you've got to be pretty accurate with your distances.
Yeah.
You then get 5 minutes or so, and you go to your ballistic calculator and you work out all your data for the next stage, basically.
And is there any restriction on what kit you can or can't use? As in, is it, by the sounds of things, it's a centre fire rifle, but presumably you can use any caliber, or like, as in, could someone turn up with a 300 WSM, or is it?
So there's a sort of a speed restriction.
Okay.
You're not most of them you're not allowed bigger than 30 cal, so you can use 308. That's fine. And normally the speed restriction is 3,200 feet per second. That's it's just to stop you firing a big heavy bullet really fast and putting holes through the plates, basically
Yeah.
damaging equipment. Um, what we've gone towards now, my centerfire rifle now is a 6BR, shooting a 107 grain bullet at about 2650, so it's not fast. It's good at bucking the wind, but it's certainly not a big, powerful caliber. You don't need great big heavy
Yeah.
calibers for this. You just need accurate ones.
And when you say tiny plates, like how big are the plates? Are we talking like
Um,
4 inch discs or a bit bigger than that?
it varies on distance. So we generally work in mils. So a plate might be half a mil. And if that's at 100 meters, that's obviously 5 centimeters. If that's at 1,000 meters, that might be 50 centimeters. So yeah, it increases the further you go
Yeah.
out. Um,
You can tell you've done this a million times because when you're like half mil and obvious at 500 meters, that means X. My really crap brain was going like 500 at this, it must be. So yeah, you can tell you've done it 1,000 times.
yeah.
Amazing. And I suppose this is kind of the purpose of this podcast, really. But do you find that having done that sort of PRS type shooting, that your shooting in general has improved?
Yes, definitely. So what you tend to find in the PRS world is the guys that have come from the stalking background or the foxing background are they tend to be the better shooters at PRS. A lot of it is target acquisition. So if you've got plates dotted all over the place, obviously if you've been out foxing at night and you've got a lamp, you've not got much to go on where you point that rifle. So you'll find that you'll naturally aim in that rifle, and you're not searching for it with the scope once you get onto the barricade, and that saves you a lot of time, which then gives you more time to take good shots.
Yeah,
So you'll find that most of the top shooters are deer stalkers and foxes as well.
interesting. And if you had to give the listeners sort of your, I don't know, top three tips in terms of if they were going to take something away to improve their own shooting, what would you say?
Um, yes.
What are the areas that you see people most go wrong with their shooting on? And you can use me as an example because you helped correct me at the Bagara event, I think, actually, didn't you? And I kept missing a plate at whatever silly distance it was.
Yeah, I think you were struggling from canting the rifle over there.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean at general hunting distances, there's not many of the things that we make really accurate shots with that will help with your deer stalking because if you're going up to 200 meters, then the canting the rifle and wind and all that sort of thing don't have a massive effect. Once you're getting out to 500 and further, then that's when you really have to think about all your trigger control and your follow through and being square behind the rifle and all that sort of thing. Um, yeah, there's quite a lot goes into making a good shot, on a time limit as well. That's the pressure side of it.
Yeah.
Um,
So if your average deer stalker that's probably, well, if they're like me, they're taking shots at sort of 250 meters or less, the sort of things that you would say to them in terms of, right, the things you've got to get right because they're going to make a difference to your shooting are X, and the things that you can probably ignore are Y. What would sort of fall into each category?
um, yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one. That it just sort of comes naturally now.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'd definitely recommend getting square behind the rifle. It doesn't matter whether you're prone, whether you're standing on sticks, off a fence post, off a bonnet, anything like that. Just get square behind the rifle. If you can say if you're standing, if you can lock your legs straight, you lock your knees straight, that takes out the muscle element of you standing still. Then you've got sort of a bone connection to the floor, basically. That'll help with your wobble. A good firm grip on the rifle, not necessarily pulling it tight into your shoulder. So you'll see a lot of us guys are using muzzle brakes. Even with like my six BR, there's not a lot of recoil, but when I take the shot, the butt of the rifle is nowhere near my shoulder. It's completely free recoiled. Um,
so when you say nowhere near your shoulder, is it like a centimeter away, or are we talking like a couple of mils away?
Probably a couple of centimeters, maybe an inch, something like
Really?
that. Yeah, yeah. And that's just so you're not putting any input into the rifle then.
Yeah,
So we're resting it on bags, on sandbags, and we're steering the rifle with well, I steer the rifle with my left hand,
yeah,
up on the fore end, and then just back the shot. If I've got wobble, I back my shoulder away from it, and that just eliminates all the wobble. And then yeah, you take the shot as you're on target. And I find myself doing that now in the stalking world as well, shooting off sticks. It just eliminates all wobble, because if the rifle sat there on sticks, it's not going to move unless you make it move.
yeah.
So if you start pulling your shoulder into it and you're moving around slightly, or you're breathing, it's going to make the rifle go up and down. Um, so yeah, that's how I shoot anyway. Is free recoil in it. Um, Flinching
Interesting.
is another one.
Yeah,
An example of this is a friend of mine turned up to shoot a competition. He'd only shot rimfire before that. We put him into a centre fire competition. Hadn't done a lot of centre fire shooting. We was finding he was going low under the target after I'd shot the same stage with the same data and the same rifle. It turns out he was anticipating the shot. It was coming from a shotgun background, so that millisecond of flinching was just dipping the barrel, and it's making the shot go low. Same can happen on sticks. You make go high.
yeah,
So if you can just try and eliminate that flinch, not worry what's going to happen with a big loud boom when it goes off, worry about it afterwards, then you'll definitely make more accurate shots that way.
yeah.
Um, Following through is one of the big things as well. Following through on the shot with your trigger control and staying on the gun. So what I've sort of taught myself to do now is when I squeeze the trigger, the gun goes off. I do not take my eyes off of that target until I've seen the bullet do something. Whether it's missed the plate or it's hit the plate or anything like that, it's just that trigger stays fully depressed,
Yeah,
um, and you just wait until something's happened. So it becomes quite evident that you have a problem with that with rim fires. If you snatch at the trigger and sort of get a little tiny bit of flinch, you'll miss a lot of the times. You really have to be consistent with the following through on those and not moving at all once you've pulled that trigger. Um,
interesting.
so again, in the deer stalking world, it plays in nicely that you watch what the bullet does, where it hits the animal. You know when you've taken a clean shot. Then, I mean,
And
anything over 150 meters, you should be able to see the bullet hit the
yeah,
animal really. Um, Unless you
It's
use a great big heavy caliber, then the
yeah.
ball's not pointing at the animal once it's gone off.
It's
Um,
interesting because we're for people that have watched some of our videos of Harry and I out stalking, I'm probably slower to reload than some people certainly like me to be on the videos, but I do it for exactly that reason because I think most deer stalkers think you're as soon as that trigger goes, you need to be cycling the bolt as fast as you humanly possibly can. And my view is I'd always rather take a second or two to just carry on watching, see what's happened, and then cool, calm, collected, reload, rather than literally sort of as soon as the gun goes off, head off the stock, rack that bolt. So it's good to hear that maybe I'm doing the right thing for once.
yeah, I've seen it lots of times. People pull that trigger, and yeah, we have club members down at Bisley, old guy who's been doing it years. You have the electronic screen that shows you the target, and more often than not, the bullet's not even hit the target before he's looking at the screen. It's
Yeah,
quite funny to watch. So yeah, if you can stay on that rifle and try and watch what the bullet's doing, and then think about reloading, it's you're going to make more accurate shots than snapping at the trigger, lifting your head off, trying to look for the animal.
yeah.
And yeah,
And so let's say shots are going to be within 250 meters. Realistically, as deer stalkers, have we got to worry about things like wind, humidity, our breathing, uh, or anything like that? Sort of like we spoke about canting rifles, stuff like that, or actually within 250 meters, is something like humidity just it can make so little difference. You just don't need to worry about it.
yeah. I don't think humidity is it has not that much of an effect in the UK. We're all fairly consistent with humidity across the country. Out to 250 meters, you're not going to see much of an effect from it. Winds, you might, yeah, you will see effect from winds, especially if shooting sort of a 308, a slow 308. If
That's a
you're out,
stab to the heart there, Tom. As a 308 shooter, that's a real stab. That's a low blow.
it's an old man's cartridge, isn't it?
It's a lovely cartridge. I don't know what you're talking about.
So yeah, I mean with wind, if it's if it's between sort of 10:30 and 1:30, if you're looking at a clock face, then the speed, like gusts of wind, won't make a massive difference to where it's going. It's the angle. So if it switches from say 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, it's going to push the bullet in completely different directions.
Yeah,
If you see if you've got a wind coming from sort of 10:30 to 7:30, so say from your left, that's when gusts will start affecting it. But angle has very little effect on it then. So yeah, it's but to 250, it's not a massive problem. Um, if it's blowing a gale, then just try and get in a little bit closer, maybe. Um,
yeah.
yeah, your atmospherics and things like that are not really going to have much effect. Can, as we've said about, it's not going to really affect things.
The,
Incline may have a
yeah,
slight effect on it. Um, so I worked out a few sort of an example for you. So my 6mm BR is shooting the 107s at 2580 from 100 meter zero. If we're shooting completely horizontal, no incline at all, to get to 300 meters is 1.6 mils or 5.6 MOA for
yeah.
the other listeners. If we put a 30-degree incline in that, which if you're up in Scotland and Highlands, you may well be shooting at a 30-degree angle like that, um, it will cause the bullet to go 3.5 inches higher than you'd expect.
Three and
If
a
you
half inches.
if you just dialed the 300 meter zero from zero angle and shot that down at 30 degrees,
Yeah.
it will cause you to go high. So it's the the way you work it out is how long is the bullet being affected by gravity as such. Um, so if you take a 300-meter shot, but the light down at 30 degrees, it's only traveling horizontally 260 meters. You're losing some of the sort of distance basically. So yeah, that works out at a 3.5 inch difference.
That's a much bigger difference than I would ever have anticipated.
Yeah, yeah.
Luckily, here in the Chilterns, I don't think I've ever quite got to 30 degrees, but that's definitely something to bear in mind.
Yeah, I mean, and that's with a 6mm, a fairly flat cartridge.
You're
Anything
about to
big,
say something rude about my 308 again, aren't you?
anything bigger and slower, you're going to increase that
Yeah,
difference, that offset in it.
yeah,
So yeah, it's something to think about. But I mean, realistically, you might shoot a fallow at that distance. If you're 3.5 inches high on its chest, then it's not the end of the world, is it? You're still going to
right.
put it in the vitals. But for us in the competition world, that might mean a difference of missing a plate.
Yeah,
So we have to take all of that into account with it as well.
yeah.
So yeah.
Interesting. So in going back to sticks, because this is something I've been playing around with quite a lot this summer, trying to do quite a lot more practice and improve my shooting, partly as a result of that Bagara event, because it highlighted to me, because as I said, shooting out to 200 meters, most of your shots are fairly okay, and you can make a few mistakes, and actually it doesn't relate into any mistakes in the field, if you know what I mean. As in
Yeah.
your trigger pull can be bad, you could have the rifle canted, you could be using the sticks wrong, you could have dialed the wrong amount on your scope, everything. And actually, generally speaking, within the tolerances of deer stalking, you're probably not even going to notice. But when
Yeah.
we were shooting out at sort of 600 meters on plates and with a bit of incline, decline, etc., and me canting the rifle and doing other things silly, you could
Yeah.
see it, because it was the difference between hitting it and not hitting it. So I've been doing a fair bit of practice in the summer to try and put some of those things right. Um, so because you say standing kind of or being square on behind the rifle. So if you're up on sticks, are you literally sort of, if these are your sticks here, you're literally directly behind them, or are you slightly side on?
I'm directly behind them.
Yeah,
You'll see lots of people that come from the shotgun side of things. You're bladed to the gun.
yeah,
Your body might be at 45, which it can cause the rifle to sort of recoil up and right.
yeah,
If you think about the place for the rifle to go is then away from you like that. If you're square behind it
yeah,
and the rifle's square into your shoulder, the only thing you're going to get is it coming back and going up slightly.
yeah,
So we're trying to eliminate that offset of sending the rifle off somewhere that it doesn't want to be. And if you're square and it comes directly back at you, you can stay on the target. And if anything, the crosshairs will go above the deer and then drop back down to the deer. If
yeah,
you bring that angle into it, you're then off to the side of the deer, and you might have to come back and try and find it. And yeah, so getting square behind it is a big thing to try and get behind. It can feel quite unnatural, because many people pick up a gun, lean the sort of left shoulder forward,
yeah,
grip it on the forend, and yeah, that's just how everyone sort of learned to shoot, really.
yeah.
Um, but
And
yeah,
it's interesting, again, kind of thinking it all through in terms of the things you were saying. The number of times I've I've been behind my sticks and they've not been quite the right height for whatever reason, whether I'm shooting uphill, downhill, the ground isn't level, or I've opened them too wide or something, and I've just squatted slightly with my legs, so my muscles have been um, tensed is the right word.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. So actually, again, kind of introducing poor marksmanship there as well. So interesting.
yeah. If you can take that extra few seconds to adjust the sticks and get you stood with your legs locked,
Mm,
that eliminates all that muscle sort of bouncing around them, basically.
yeah. And how often are you practicing with?
Um, yeah, I practice a little bit with the rim fires, just because it's affordable. I don't generally practice much with the centre fires. I've mostly been concentrating on the rimfire competitions the last year or so. We went over to Italy last year for the World Championships, just PRS rimfire. I was part of the open team. We managed a silver medal behind the Americans. So we done okay there. I'm fortunate enough to have a 200 meter rimfire range with all barricades and multiple targets and things 2 minutes from my house.
Wow.
So I can go out and just have a play around there whenever I feel
Yeah.
like it. But yeah, I think the best practice is actually shooting competitions, because I can go to the range, I can shoot the stage over and over and get it perfect. But until you've got that time pressure and everyone stood around you watching and it counts, you can't replicate that.
Yeah.
So the best practice is just to go and shoot a comp, basically.
And are you a believer in dry firing? As in, if we came to your house one evening, would we find you kind of laid on the floor, prone behind your rifle, dry firing with a set of snap caps, or not for you?
Not for me. Definitely not for me. No, I've never been into dry firing. I don't see the real benefit from it. And unless the rifle's going bang and you've got the whole experience, then I can't see the benefit of it.
Yeah, fair enough. So if, say, your advice, if there's some deer stalkers out there thinking, right, I probably need to work on my marksmanship principles, is get yourself signed up to a PRS batch, and that will really polish your
Absolutely.
skills, is it? Okay.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, it is the perfect practice situation for deer stalking.
Yeah.
Um,
And where, like, so again, like, say me, I know nothing about PRS. After today's conversation, if I go, yeah, right, that's it, I'm going to give it a go. How do I get into it?
so the first thing I'd say is look at the GBPRA, the Great Britain Precision Rifle Association.
Yeah.
They've got a website. They list all of the competitions which are being run across the UK. There's lots of helpful information on there on how to get started. It can be quite daunting. Everyone thinks they're the best shot in the world, but they won't come and put the money on the line at a competition in case they get beat. It can be a bit worrying like that. But if you turned up at a comp with a stalking rifle or nothing else, people will be throwing kit at you. Have a go with this, use that. It's one of the friendliest bunches of people going. Um, Everyone wants you to use their kit and just get involved. We just want new shooters all the time just to grow the
Yeah.
sport.
And is it expensive, as in to sign up to a competition? Is there entry fees of, I don't know, 10 quid, 20 quid, 100 quid?
So for the rimfire side of things, it's generally about £50 a day. That'll be 100 shots, 8 or 10 stages. So it's a full day shooting, and then you're only looking at sort of 20 quid in ammo then as well, which is not bad. Centre fire is a little more pricey. Generally, they're 2 day competitions, about £170 to enter, and then you need nearly 200 rounds of centre fire ammo as well. Which
200 rounds.
the PRS weekend comp might be 200 rounds.
Bloody hell, you can see why you guys get so good at it if you're doing 200 rounds in a weekend.
Yeah, I mean, generally a stage will be 10 or 12 shots, and we'll do
Yeah.
8 or 10 of them in a day. Um, but yeah, you soon get through
Ha-
it. You soon get to pull the trigger a few times.
Yeah. How quickly are you burning through barrels then?
Not that quickly for me because I don't do a massive amount of the centre fire side of things. The rim fire side of it is, it's the barrel life is endless, basically.
Yeah.
We've all had custom barrels put on by Mike Norris at Brock and Norris now. He seems to be the rimfire guru recently. But it's buy once, cry once sort of thing with that. You're never going to wear it out. With your
Yeah.
rim centre fire, if you're using a Creedmoor, you might get 3,000 rounds out of it in competition
Yeah.
scenarios. So if you just shot competitions for the year, you get a year and a half, maybe 2 years out of it. There's only 6 or 7 sort of 2 day centre fire comps at the moment. There are more coming online, but yeah, it's one of them. If you want to get good, you have to practice. If you practice, then you got to spend the money on ammo and barrels, basically.
I mean, that does put it into sharp focus in terms of the amount of shooting you guys are doing and practice you're doing compared to, I put myself out there as a deer stalker in that I would be surprised if I shoot 100 rounds a year in a practice sense,
Yeah.
and probably shooting, let's say, well, last year 170 deer, so 170 bullets on deer. So if you say I'm shooting 270 bullets a year, and you guys are pretty much doing that in a weekend.
Yeah, you'd probably do that on a weekend because you'd want to zero your rifle and check data and everything beforehand. So yeah, you'd be doing 250 in a weekend.
Wow. So this is a slightly unfair question, but in fairness, the listeners probably don't realise I did prompt you or prep you on this one. Is that as a target shooter, you are going to have a far better understanding of ballistics and the workings of scopes and what they all mean than the rest of us are going to mean, because most of us probably buy a or certainly me when I started, bought a fixed power scope, slapped it on the rifle, that was it. Then upgraded to one with variable magnification, and then one day I took the plunge to buy one with a turret for the ballistic elevation on it. And to be honest, the first one I bought, I think I had the choice. I think it said to me, "Do you want it in mils, MOA, or was it centimeters at 100 meters?" And I was like, I haven't got a chuffing clue. And I think two of them were out of stock and one of them wasn't. So I was like, well, I'll have the one that's not out of stock.
Yeah.
And I think it was MOA at the time. And since then, the two scopes I've got are European and they're centimeters at 100 meters. But it took me a long time to work out actually what it all meant. And I thought, given that you are the man that can do the maths of how many mils at 500 meters or whatever it was, whether you would be kind enough to explain it to some of our other listeners who were probably sitting there thinking, what the hell are they talking about?
So your centimeters at 100 meters is basically mils.
Yeah,
So 1 mil is 10 centimeters at 100 meters. So
yeah,
you're always working in tens with mils, which makes life easy. It lines up with meters. So if you turned up at a competition, everyone would be ranging in meters. Everyone would be talking in mils. That is one thing you do see is guys turn up with MOA. They're on their own basically because everyone else is talking a different language. So yeah, mils is one a 0.1 of a mil is a centimeter at 100 meters. So 0.1 of a mil at 1,000 meters is 10 centimeters. Or 1 mil at 1,000 meters is a meter. So it's just basic, simple tens basically.
yeah,
You go over to your MOA, then you're talking about quarters and halves, and it being 1 inch at 100 yards. But
I was
then
going to say,
everyone
yeah,
ranges in meters, and then you're talking about 6 inch plates and things like that. But it's a bit more difficult. But if that's what you're used to, then I
yeah,
don't quite know why, as here, almost part of Europe, that we still use MOA and yards. Yeah, it's a very American thing,
mm,
that side of things. Yeah, it's Mills is definitely the easier way to work out in a competition.
yeah. I think I have eventually ended up essentially in mils, because for me, I I'm better at guesstimating distances in meters than I am in yards, because meters mean something to me, whereas yards don't really.
Yeah,
So if I see a deer, I can be like, well, that's 100 meters. Whereas if someone was like, how many yards is it? I'm sort of going, well, what's that? 97? Is it 97 yards to 100 meters or something silly?
109, I think.
109. Well, there you go.
Yeah, yards are shorter than meters.
Yeah,
So,
interesting.
yeah.
So, Tom, I'm conscious we've taken up quite a lot of your evening, but are there any kind of words of wisdom you would impart as a deer target shooting guru for the average deer stalker out there?
I'd say just come along and have a go at a competition. Your eyes will be opened right up to what is possible with the rifle you've already got.
Yeah,
It's yeah. If you turn up with a deer stalking rifle, people will love the underdog story.
yeah,
If you turn up and you're good with it and you're beating us guys with our fancy custom rifles, then all the better for you, sort of thing.
yeah.
It's
So if I turn up with my single shot wooden stock Kiplauf, am I going to get laughed out of there? Or
If you turned up with something like that, possibly yes.
okay, right,
Yes.
I'll leave that one at home. I'll bring the Tika.
Yeah, all of my rifles are Tikas.
Yeah,
Every single one. There's nothing wrong with Tikas. Yeah, we have guys turn up with 5-shot mags. You just have to do a mag change after the first stage and carry on. Off you go, and they still do just as well as everyone else.
yeah,
It's good fun, and you'll certainly learn a bit more about your rifle and your shooting skills.
yeah. Interesting. So before we let you go, there is one final bit to our podcast, which I'll explain. Every time we do it, we say, "Oh, we're never going to explain it again," but I will just explain it. We do a final segment called Bobby's Bits, and basically, many years ago, Harry's younger brother Bobby took a gap year between school and university. He was working, so he had a full-time job. He was living at home, so he had loads of money. He was into his shooting, his deer stalking, and so he went out and bought every bit of kit you could possibly imagine. I think there's one time he turned up deer stalking, he still had price tags on his new binoculars, scope, rifle, sling, everything. It was crazy. So we always ask our guests, what's the one bit of kit, shooting-wise, you couldn't live without? But equally, is there a bit of kit you're hankering after?
Range finding binos are what I would have to take with me.
Yeah.
For the deer stalking side of things, not as important, but for the competition side, I need to know the distances. Otherwise, you're just guessing basically.
And as a Zeiss pro shooter, I'm guessing your chosen pair is a pair of Zeiss Victory or whatever they are, but range finding binos.
Yeah, I've got the 1054s, the big ones. Yeah, I wouldn't go to a competition without them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite surprising how many people do still turn up and they're asking you every time, what's the distance on that? What's the distance on this? It's sort of an essential piece of kit basically. And it's handy for the deer stalking as well. It's with stalking up in Scotland, longer shots maybe. It's worth knowing exactly what it is, just so you can make an ethical shot basically.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I wouldn't go without. It's rangefinder binos.
And is there a bit of kit you're hankering after at the moment? Is there something that's on your one of the internet tabs on your phone that you're like, oh, one day I'm going to buy that? But
Probably one of the latest Kestrel ballistic salvers.
yeah,
I've got one of the older versions, but it does have a few flaws when you're getting out long distance with rimfire. So yeah, one of the new ones which has got an applied ballistic custom drag curve in there, which is going to help massively with the rimfire side of things. Yeah,
I'm going to smile and nod and pretend to know what a custom ballistic drag curve is.
yeah.
It sounds complicated, and it sounds like you need a new Kestrel to figure that out.
Yeah, we won't.
In my technical opinion.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, that's really kind of you to have joined us, Tom, and thank you very much for sparing so much of your time and letting us quiz you on PRS shooting, but also the technical bits of shooting that as deer stalkers we try to avoid. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. Thank you, Tom.